So today I'm going to continue from where I stopped yesterday. I showed you the microzonation which defined the seismic hazard in the city of Porto, Spain. So today I'm going to show you the probabilistic seismic risk assessment that was done. The project was funded by USAID. It was run by a global geotechnical company called Miyamoto International Ltd. The benefactor was the Ministry of National Security and ODPM, and they collaborated with us in order to be able to collect all the data available. So we all established that we have earthquakes in the Caribbean. It might be moderate seismicity, but we do get large events like the ones you see on the screen. You see the 2004 in Dominica, 2007 in Tobago. We have damages, so the risk is considered to be significant. But we wanted to quantify that in order to have a better understanding. Now, this is a picture I took last week. I was in Saguanas. Those who don't know where it is, it's in central Trinidad, with my team doing some work, collecting data for the microzonation, and that building was right next to me. And I noticed that there is not an ounce of steel on that building. It is just bricks, one on top of the other. So we were sitting in the car, and I'm like, how can this building be built? Who gave permission for this building? Who actually builds this building? This is like the Three Pigs house. Like the bad wolf is going to blow it and it's going to fall down. It doesn't even need an earthquake. This building is going to fall on its own, right? So this is something that's still happening in Trinidad, and I have seen it happening in all the other Caribbean islands. So moving on. This is the seismicity we have around Trinidad. So we basically split it into several zones. We have earthquakes that are happening at the north of the Paria Peninsula in the subduction zone. Is this the point? Right. So on the left with the blue are the earthquakes we have in the subduction zone, which is the area of main interest for large events, but the events are deep, around 130 to 200 kilometers. We have some seismicity inside the Gulf of Paria, but it's usually small, so we don't expect a large event there. And then we have an area in Tobago that it actually has given some catastrophic events during the past 100 years. So we do have earthquakes that happen in Trinidad that can actually cause damage. The last one that we had in 2018, on the 21st of August, was again at the north of the Paria Peninsula. This is the intensity as it was recorded all over the region, so it was felt all the way to Brazil. I got someone submitting a report from Brazil, and it was felt all in the whole West Indies. And it didn't really create some damage. It was like a few cracks here and there, but it wasn't really a damaging event, so we were lucky for that. Now, the project, the probabilistic hazard assessment, was to identify 5 factors. Those were the building damage, the fatalities, the injuries, the internally displaced people, and the debris. Usually in this type of studies, they put also the cost, so the repair cost to bring back the place to how it was before the earthquake, but in this study we didn't do that. So it is these 5 factors that we need to identify. I know that all of you are interested in the building damage, but the other factors are also equally crucial for us. So how it is done, the workflow is that we have the hazard, which is what I showed you yesterday, and then we have the exposure, which is the buildings that we have on top of the ground, and then we have the building fragility, all of them coming together, and we end up creating the map with the probability risk The hazard, we already discussed that yesterday. This is the latest PSHA map that we have. The workflow was based on the 475 years return period, and adjusting for the geological conditions that are inside the city. The city doesn't have Class A sites. It has Class B on the hills and Class C and D near the coast. So this is the hazard we are facing. So as you can see, down at the coast, it goes up to half a G, which is a significant level of acceleration in terms of PGA. With regards to liquefaction, which was also a hazard taken into account, you see how it appears when we put it on the geological conditions. As you can see, it is still looking like the one I produced yesterday, using totally different methods. So we do have higher levels of potential of liquefaction by the coast and around the savanna. So how we did it is that we split the city corp boundaries into communities the same way that the city corp is dealing with it. We did a field survey, which this happens during COVID, so this is 2020, 2021. Usually how this works is that we send you people out in the streets, you are surveying the buildings, you're talking to the residents, you find out the occupancy, you find out the material of construction, the height and everything else, and you bring that back. Since we couldn't do that, what we did is that we used our vehicle, we put GoPro cams on it, left and right, and we're driving up and down the streets. We collected the information in pictures and videos, and then we passed it to Beston Consulting, who volunteered to help us with the engineering part. So they were able to identify the buildings by watching videos and pictures that we captured. Then we went to the city census data to get some information from them. It was helpful, but not as helpful as I would want to be. I made a suggestion at some point to the Statistics Office and to the Ministry of Planning and Development that at the next census, they can use the engineering students, if they want, to go with them. We need to collect information for the buildings, not just who lives there, but where do they live, what type of buildings we have in the country. We need this information. So all of this go into the blender, to the software, and we get the exposure model. So the city of Port of Spain was split in 27 primary zones, the same way as it has been split by the City Hall itself. We considered 12 special zones. This was medical facilities, religious structures, and large buildings, large high-rise buildings. So for the large high-rise, it was One Woodbrook and downtown, actually, where we are here, because the Government Plaza and all the high-rise buildings. This is what we have in Port of Spain, by extension in Trinidad. So we have a vast variety of buildings. This is the classification according to the Hazardous taxonomy in the States, but we follow the same, including some buildings that are unique in the Caribbean, like the informal and the wooden one. And this is how we did it. So we surveyed the area. The buildings are a little bit over 15,000 in Port of Spain. We surveyed about less than 5% of them to get a representative classification. We used the car with the GoPro cams, and then we also used, I think it was 4 or 5 students from the engineering, who we sent them into the City Hall. So they went down to the archives, and they collected some information from the archives about buildings that we would then survey with the car. This is how the exposed buildings are. So we have a lot of buildings in the area of Belmont, northeast, in the area of Woodbrook, which is the residential buildings, the areas, the St. James, and then we have a lot of people working downtown here, since we have a lot of vertical construction. These are the fragility curves. We calculated both for ground shaking and for liquefaction. We got some help from Lake Dr. Clark, who helped us with the fragility curves for the informal residential buildings in Trinidad, since we couldn't find this information anywhere else. And then we did the seismic risk identification. Okay, so we have the hazard, we have the exposure, and we have the fragility. And this is what is going to happen as a conservative option for the worst case scenario. So as you can see, you have practically 60% of the buildings are going to be yellow or red. That means 60% of the buildings will not survive the earthquake. Now, in terms of the human impact, we split it to daytime and nighttime, which basically means office hours and not office hours. So daytime means people are at work, nighttime means people are home. So if it is on a Sunday, it is nighttime all the time. Okay, you understand the difference? So we will have about 2.5% fatalities, but we will have a huge debris to clean up. And that needs to be already planned. If that happens, where are we going to put that debris? Now, I'll make a pause here and say that I have done this presentation to several entities. When I presented it to the City Hall itself, one of the councillors said, okay, so the people who got hurt will take them to Diego. And I was like, you don't think that in Diego Martin they will feel the earthquake? How are you going to take them to Diego Martin, the next valley? If it happens here, it will happen all around the island. It's not a problem of Port of Spain, it's a problem of the nation itself. And the other important evaluation from here is that you are going to also have close to 60% of the population internally displaced. That means that these people don't have a home to go back. So we need to take care of these people and put them somewhere safe. Now comes to the damage. You can see how the distribution is. Most of the red tag buildings will be again in Belmont. That is due to the density of the construction and the quality of the construction. And then it will be followed by the residential areas of Woodbrook and St. James. When it comes to debris, the district, the community that's going to be most affected is downtown. It's right here. That is because of the vertical construction we have. So small space, high-rise buildings. This is where we are going to have to clean up the most. And when it comes to daytime fatalities, again, it will be downtown, since most of the people are working around this area. And when it comes to the nighttime, it will follow the building distribution. So again, it will be Belmont, St. James, Woodbrook, and East Port of Spain. The internally displaced people will follow again the building distribution. So again, it will be the people from Belmont that we will need to take care of, following by the other residential areas. So after that was done, Miyamoto suggested what to do next. You have to keep in mind that these people never set foot in Trinidad. They were in San Francisco and we were just sending them the data and they were doing the analysis. They have done it in other Caribbean areas too, but they never actually set foot on Trinidad. So, according to them, we need to have a strengthening program to help identify where is the vulnerable areas so we can be more prepared in how we are going to help with all of them, to establish a post-earthquake damage assessment, which there is actually a protocol how to do damage assessment by using engineers. So we developed actually a module that will be passed on to engineers in case of an earthquake, that they can actually go outside and start surveying the buildings really quick. And to develop more communication between us and the communities so they will be aware of what is the condition or what is the situation that we may have to deal with one day. Then they asked me who live in Trinidad, what do I think? So for me, I think first knowing what may come, and this should be a standard practice that should periodically be exercised. We need to assess our critical facilities and make sure that they are up to the state that they should be. Because if we have damaged critical facilities, that means that the country cannot run. So we'll get stuck. We need to reassess where we have the critical facilities. For example, the main fire station in Port of Spain is right across the street. And this is the area that's going to be most impacted by an earthquake. That means that these guys will not be able to help. The main police station is 2 blocks behind us, in the heart of the city, surrounded by 3 very narrow streets. If these streets got blocked, these guys will not be able to help. To check our shelters and try to expand it, although if the scenario turns to be true, there will be no amount of shelters that will be able to host this. The good thing about here is that the weather is nice, so you can all sleep outside. You don't really need containers, just a tent and you will be fine, right? Because when that happened in L'Aquila, it was winter and people living outside in the snow. So consider yourself lucky about that. And to have more volunteers who will actually be trained in order to be able to help, not just for earthquakes, but for any other hazard. There's a certain program that trains people how to take care of other people and how to do search and rescue, which is running. It is not very big right now, but hopefully with time, more and more people will engage in this. As I told you yesterday, we have done some work in other areas. So you see, what you are seeing here, though, is different. What I showed you for Port of Spain is a probabilistic risk. This is a deterministic risk. So this scenario runs the same earthquake that happened in 1904 or 07 in Kingston. What would have happened if it happened today? So Kingston, which is a 500,000 city people, if something like that happened, you can see that the damage that is going to happen to the buildings in Kingston, especially at the north part, is going to be phenomenal. And this one also actually ran the financial aspect of it. So you have like more than 30,000 people considered fatalities. This is about 12%. And you will have an economic loss of 12.4 billion US in order to be able to reconstruct Kingston back to how it was, how it is today. And then we ran the similar thing for Dominica. Actually, we ran it for the whole island, since it's so small. The scenario plays for an earthquake of magnitude 6.7 happening at the north of Dominica, about 10 kilometers away, where it is the Rosso fault zone. This is the same fault that gave the 2004 magnitude 0.6 earthquake. So in case of Rosso, you can see that, in case of Dominica, sorry, you can see, so on the left, you see the hazard. On the top right, you see the casualties, which will be located at the north part of the island. On the middle right, you see the dislocated people, so what area is going to be affected and people won't have a home to return to. And on the bottom left, you see the damage of the buildings, and on the bottom right, you see the loss, the economic loss. So the economic loss for Dominica is going to account for more than 200% of the GDP, which is not, they are not that much on the GDP, but still is going to put the country in severe debt, and you will have 1/6 of the country counting as casualties. And I believe that should be the end of the presentation. Aren't you glad I made it after you ate?
Dr. Ilias, I think nobody wanted to clap because that's too super in a presentation. Do we have another microphone? Where's the... So you can keep...
All right.
showed two slides titled Suggested Next Actions. All of them were response. None of them had to do with reducing future damage. The suggested next action should be better education of engineers, better training of graduates, better enforcement of standards. Those are the next actions.
Well, I would agree, but again, this was not intended to be presented to you. So if I go to the government and say, train the engineers, nothing is going to happen. I'm glad you mentioned it
So
to the engineering body.
Whom are you addressing?
This is for the Ministry of National Security.
What?
That was, the project was done, the benefactor was the Ministry of National Security and ODPM.
Well,
What we did though, aside
they're
from
the people
this,
who need to know the proper next actions.
I agree. But what happened, aside from what you saw here, this is the first year of the project. After this was done, the second year, engineers and contractors who actually built were trained into safe practices and how to build better. I don't think that they included structural engineers, but it was civil engineers, young civil engineers, and it was people who are in the building industry without being an engineer. But I'm glad that you mentioned it because obviously this is your part. You are the ones who build. So you need to build better. I'm not the one who's going to tell you how. That's why you have Mr. Gibbs. But based on the picture that I showed you in the beginning, I think there's room for improvement. Right? Yes, Savas.
Thanks for the presentation, Ilias. You mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I hear in your presentation that we'll have liquefaction apart from the coastal area.
Savannah.
You mentioned also Savannah. Yesterday you didn't mention that about Savannah, anything.
No,
and we focus on the coastal area because it's reclaimed land. How come, why liquefaction in Savannah?
Because in Savannah, the water aquifer is actually very low. So Savannah is also, has a high liquefaction potential. We focused on the coast because nobody lives in the Savannah. So, and unless if you are in the Savannah at the time of the earthquake, once it liquefies, that means that it's a safe ground, and it's a big ground, so we can put actually a lot of people there.
So you mean Savannah, not the surrounding area?
No, I'm talking inside the Savannah.
Oh, okay.
Just inside the Savannah. Yes?
Hi, Ilias. Kind of following on from what Mr. Gibbs asked, I would have thought the next actions is to do a review of the existing infrastructure and building stock.
I agree.
And see where and how it needs retrofitting. I'll give you an example. A client of mine asked me to do a review of a building in Barbados, not in Port of Spain once. And I had a quick look at it and I told him, look, if you pay me this money to go and do this, it's going to come out and say that it's not designed properly for earthquakes. It's a very old building. And if you want me to do it, I'll go ahead and do it. He said, no, don't worry, don't do it. Right? There don't seem to be an interest in knowing what's going on.
I can speak on behalf of Trinidad or Trinidadians. I can speak more or less on behalf of the other Caribbean islands. Trinidadians don't count earthquake as their main hazard. Okay? And actually, the earthquake that happened in 2018 did more damage to me than it did good. Because they got under the impression that if we survive that earthquake, then definitely God is a Trini, and definitely we don't have anything to worry. Okay? So they compared the earthquake of 2018, which happened 150 kilometers away at 130 meters depth, so hypocentral distance about 180 kilometers, with the same magnitude earthquake that happened in Haiti in 2014, which happened 10 kilometers away at 5 kilometer depth. And they said, we're safe. Now, as much as I talk, as much as I tell them you don't understand it, as much as I tell them they notice, they still compare it. And they still think that, yes, Trinidad acted. That event shouldn't have a crack on the wall. It shouldn't have a crack on the wall. So after the event, the Ministry of Works actually sent the engineers to the hospitals and to the schools to see the damage. The reports that came back from the damage of school, nothing collapsed. There was no large damage, but there was a lot of minor damage that happened in a lot of schools. Okay? So imagine if that earthquake, in that earthquake, I think it gave about 0.2 G as PGA value. Imagine if that was a 7.5 or a 7.6, or if I pull the earthquake 50 kilometers closer, how different the conversation would have been today. But people, especially when people don't understand what it is, you are engineers and you understand the differences. People who are in a position of power and they don't understand what I'm saying, they understand how they felt. They're like, okay, we shook in 2018, but okay, nothing really bad happened. So we're good. Yes, please.
I'm not surprised. Thanks for your presentation. I'm not surprised from the number you have shown. But I have two comments. One connects to what Omar said in terms of retrofitting. It's not about build new. It's about retrofitting, which saves a lot of life. And more importantly, I think you spot a critical issue, which is infrastructure. You mentioned that the fire station is in a narrow street.
It's right across from here.
I'm not familiar with the area.
Yeah,
I'm taking your word as as like God. But the thing is that there are the infrastructure that are even more important than built asset. Because if you have a nice hospital or an hospital that has been slightly damaged, but is not reachable, it means that the hospital cannot be used. So
exactly.
The priority that is missing even from this study is not, I'm not, simply criticizing this one, but it's just this figure to me reminds a number of things that I've seen before, which shows that this is a very important component, but it needs to be complemented with the most important part of it, how we access. What is the way we should go through, for example, to access hospital, fire station, or critical facility, more importantly, to allow foreigner, possibly even support that can come here to give assistance. You mentioned, for example, the shelters that are very important. So this is a very good study. I think there is a lot to be done in terms of retrofitting more than built new. I agree with Mr. Gibbs, but it's probably, you said, a different audience to be targeted. But I also would like to include, because there is a number of infrastructure aging, which is a basic point there as well. I mean, this structure that you say need to be known are aging. This study in 5 years' time will become not applicable because then the structure is becoming weaker and weaker, and the hazard may become higher and higher because of climate change. Thanks for the presentation.
Exactly, yes. Well, this is a factor of concern, and the thing is that we presented this to the ODPM, who is the body here who is responsible for taking care of disasters post-event. So people are getting more aware that, okay, we are not in so good condition that we thought we are. And you see that although we have a low fatality rate, we still have significant structural damage. And that has to do with both the hazard, the soil, that we have in town, but it also has to do with the building practices. So the main thing with what Mr. Gibbs said is the enforcement, which I've been saying for years, that because people come to me and they say, you know what, the code, and we need to update it. I'm like, your problem is not the code. Your problem is the same one that you mentioned for Barbados. They have a code, but nobody enforces the code. Nobody checks how they build. So what's the point of having something that you don't even use? So before starting the discussion about codes, updating, getting up to speed and whatnot, we need to discuss how we are going to make this an actually daily routine or practice. That is the most important thing. Otherwise, all these talks are for nothing. Anyone else?
Yes. So in the 2018 earthquake, my father-in-law was in the hospital in the, I guess you would say the terminal ward when it happened. And the building deformed, right, but didn't collapse. And they evacuated that hospital wing the very same afternoon, completely. So I would say that although you might have the impression that Trinidad, the construction practices are not bad, the building that was built, must have been built in the 1960s, I think it was Block C, right? Actually performed as it was supposed to. There was deformations in the cantilever walkways, right? And some of the beams, when I went to move him, but the building survived by and large intact. We were able to decant the building with all the people, and so it's not a totally bad picture. Some buildings were retrofitted afterwards in and around Port of Spain.
Well, I'm not saying that all buildings are bad, same as I'm not saying that you people don't know how to build. I'm saying quite the opposite. You know how to build, obviously, and I'm pretty sure that you do a pretty good job. The problem is that you are not the only ones who build. There is other people in the country who also build without having your knowledge. And this needs to change if we want to build a safer nation for us to live. It can be, let's bring my friends over the weekend for beers and build a house. That practice needs to change, but in order for this to change, that means that the government has to be more strict who builds where and how. Savas was giving me an example of people who come to your house, they say, oh, I like your house, give me the design and I'll go buy my place and build the same one. That's not how it works, and you know it. But it is a practice in Trinidad. It happens in Trinidad. I'm assuming it happens on the other islands too. So there's things that need to change culturally, statutorily, things need to improve. It can't be, okay, the weather is nice, so who cares? Any other question?
Thank you, Dr.
All right. I want to thank you for inviting me. Because some people ask me, I am all about sharing data. Any information you want from me, it's always available. You can find my email and my number by our website. You can contact the board and they will give you my details. I also included a PDF version of my presentation, so if you want them, you can get them from these people. Anything you want, just I'm a call or an email away. Okay? I also want to say that hopefully in 2 years from now, I will have something different to announce to you. Right now, we are doing a research that has never happened before at that scale. So we want to develop GMP equations inside Port of Spain. So it won't be one equation fits all. Depending on the level of research we have done in here, we will be able to provide you with attenuation equations. Where is the building you want to build? Okay? This is obviously has not that much of a practical aspect because I can't do that in every city in the world. But we're doing it as research, and then we're hoping to expand to create for the first time GMP for the West Indies. So thank you very much.